I was just wondering how does the court date affect Richard's ability to stream? Because personally, I don't think the court date really, like the court stuff, all the legal stuff with Pulsechain really matters in the same way that it didn't really matter with XRP. But I think the real effect is that Richard's getting gagged. You know, he's not able to stream legally, I guess. So, my question is when do you think he's going to be able to stream again? Like if the case does go on for another year, is he going to get gagged for the whole time that the case is on?
And I don't think he's going to be able to stream, hence why he's stayed on Twitter and doing his thing.
But basically, what we heard from Nuclear Herbs, there was a case made to like create a separation between the motion to dismiss on HEX versus Pulsechain and Pulsex because of the timeline. And then so a lot of Richard's team's arguments always kept coming back to the timeline that the SEC had presented too weak of an argument, and they were distinguishing, and the judge was asking, like, should we be distinguishing between HEX, kind of having it was a finished product. So and then there were no statements that Richard had made that the SEC was trying to claim was fraud relating to the timeline of HEX, because they were focusing on the HEX conference in person that I had put on. They were focusing on PulseCon. They were focusing on the Miami event. And so it's kind of interesting. We have Kareem here, who was in Miami when Richard was visiting and doing the Fresh and Fit podcast. You have myself, who was, putting on the conference, the HEX conference. And so we've got some representation here in our speakers for this timeline that you're seeing. Now, I was going to say, maybe if we can start walking, and maybe you can have your phone out and be logged into your Twitter Spaces so that you show up as your own speaker person. And now, Katie, thanks for tuning in. Do you have a question or comment?
I have no questions. Nuclear did an awesome job like usual.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for reporting on this, being half a world away and always there.
Thanks for showing up, and to the 75 other people that did, or 79, however many it was, to represent our community, and the people that traveled from outside of the US, because at the end of the day, I think that shows a lot of commitment from our community. And we aren't just US based, like it's far from it. If you look at our global map for like the validators, you can see we're like a fully global community. And the lawyers and everybody else, they really do watch our community. Like everybody has always watched our community. So like what you say on Twitter holds a lot of value, and I think people need to remember that. So yeah, BB, you have your hand up. Feel free to go.
Hey guys. Yeah, look, I just joined the Pulsechain community about 5 months ago. Oh no, 12 months ago.
Welcome to the party.
All this is thanks, man. Thanks. It's it's a cool community to be a part of. But obviously, I missed the big HEX run, and I always heard of Richard Hart in the background. I didn't know, like, oh, is this guy a scammer? Is he not? But I just like the community. I like the principles, so I went in pretty hard a year ago. But I've been following this case, and I just wanted to get everyone's opinion, because personally, I don't really think the case matters at all to the future of Pulsechain. I don't think whatever comes of it, I don't think it matters in the same way it didn't matter for XRP. They were obsessed with the court case, and then when that was resolved, it still didn't matter.
I love your take that you just said. That's really cool that you're somebody who's joined in recent months, and you like the community, and you think we're different than XRP, and we're not only counting on the court case. We're not counting on a middleman or a government body to tell us what we're doing.
Exactly, yeah, and I guess where I'm coming from is I think like where the case does affect Pulsechain is that Richard's gagged. He can't talk, he can't stream, and that's that's his greatest.
I mean,
strength, right? Is his marketing.
I'm glad you bring that up, because it became so clear why Richard isn't YouTubing when I was in there, and they were bringing up one sentence that he had said in the last 3 major appearances he had done to the community, and so it's clear that this was a fundamental part of the SEC strategy, was to use his YouTube content, not even his content, my content.
His words,
His words, and so it was also really cool to hear, Richard's lawyers pick apart whether there was a jurisdiction implication for any of the statements that Richard had made, but even more importantly, what the timeline was. Because when you really slice and dice all of that, is somebody has some background sound or something?
Sorry, that's me.
Okay.
My unit's getting renovated upstairs. It's a
Oh,
nightmare.
yeah, just mute when you're not talking. But yeah. So basically, what we're saying is, if Richard made a statement that the SEC thinks like was telling people, "Hey, you should sacrifice," which I don't think it was that that necessarily, but basically the idea is that he would have had to say that, whatever the SEC is worried about him saying, he would have had to say that before or during the sacrifice, not after it. And a lot of the times that the SEC was saying Richard said something that, we can count against him, we think, those were times that were after the sacrifice period.
long time.
Yeah. So that's probably like the clearest piece that that tells me why he's not YouTubing, and that tells me that Richard's lawyers, they thought maybe this is the strongest element that they can make a case for jurisdiction, or for a motion to dismiss based on jurisdiction, was the SEC's timeline being off. And the judge kept asking, well, why are we even considering the statement that he made, when it doesn't even fit into the timeline of the dates that the SEC is saying there was a sacrifice happening. Does anyone else have a question or any?
Maddie, do you mind if I ask a follow-up?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, let's say, like, if we assume the worst, which is that Richard can't stream for the next year to a year and a half, and we miss the bull market in terms of Richard's ability to stream during the bull market, where do you think the slack in the community can be taken up? How, like, what's the messaging that the community can do to bring in new users? Because I think the crunch time for us as a community is going to be when Ethereum starts to go $4,000 plus, and that's when I think together all of us as a community need to rally around the megaphone to try and bring in as many new users possible.
Yeah.
And I think we need to prepare that Richard's not going to be part of that voice. He's not going to be able to be part of that voice. So I just want to put that out there is how, we got to assume that Richard's like Satoshi. He's gone in a way.
I think what we've seen and what was argued today in court is that HEX, Pulsechain, and Pulsex, they're working without him YouTubing. They're working without him ever having said anything fraudulent. They're working decentralized without even getting to Howie. You have to
Prove that you're an investment contract.
correct. You have to prove that you're an investment contract. And so, Kareem, do you want to say something?
Yeah,
go ahead and.
So the SEC argues, right, when they were talking about Howie, again, it's a big reach. They were saying, oh, we know he's purposely trying to avoid Howie, but he's using Howie language. That was the overreaching statement. And our counsel, really good as who they are, rebuked that by simply saying, before we even start talking about Howie, like all of those other cases and all those other blockchain cases, you got to first prove that you are jurisdiction, in the sense that you got to be an investment contract. It's kind of like you got to fit this box first. And once you fit this box called being an investment contract, then you can argue whether or not it's a security, right? But they perfectly showed that, well, it was never an investment contract to begin with, because again, there is no agreement. There is no two parties signing a contract. There is no expectation of work of others, right? You are sacrificing. The money is gone. It's no longer yours, and I'm not promising you anything. Therefore, because you're not an investment contract by that definition, explicitly disclosed, right? We have better disclosure in the website for Pulsechain than even the SECs themselves in their disclosures. That's why it is not going to be needing to deal whether or not it's Howie. And that's why they were really good at it. They were not trying to rebuke that, oh, there is Howie language, right? Like the SEC has said, they simply said, before we start worrying about the Howie language, well, we shouldn't even talking about Howie because it is not an investment contract to begin with. And that was what was really, really powerful that they were able to use. Another thing that they caught up the SEC doing multiple times is basically what I call double standards. For example, in one cases, when they were talking about, again, the fraud argument, they were saying, well, we can't take every word that Richard said, because some of it is tongue in cheek, wink, wink. When he says, oh, it's not expectation of work of others, da, 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 he's basically just signaling that, oh, I'm trying to avoid securities law, this and that, and the third. But then on the other hand, they're making arguments using the YouTube content saying, we need to hold Mr. Hart accountable to the word that he says. So our counsel, again, genius as they are, saying, well, which one is it? On one hand, you said we gotta listen to what he says and use every word of what he says. And on the other hand, when he clearly says and put on the website that there's no expectation of work of others, you're sacrificing, the money is gone. Now you're saying, oh, he didn't mean it like that. Like, no, you can't have it. You can't have it both ways. So that was another really, really good thing that they were able to point out. Same thing with the jurisdiction games. At some point, they were arguing that, well, oh, we shouldn't care about whether or not he's in the country if, as long as there's those alleged, right, Americans, those people that are here that are sending money to the contract, we should focus about where those people are from. And there's many cases where the SEC itself argue for example, the Ripple case and other cases, they were very happy when they were worried more about the jurisdiction of the person itself, meaning those people being from America, right? Being listed on Coinbase, all those things that prove that, okay, they are in the United States. Therefore, we should worry about where the issuer is located. But then on this case, because the issuer is located, allegedly in Finland, now all of a sudden, oh, well, we shouldn't do that. We should talk about where the investors are from. So again, double standard. It don't make no sense. So they were able to point that out. And the judge perfectly explained to them also, well, the burden of proof is on you to prove, because she literally asked, where is the blockchain, right? They couldn't even explain that, because this is where we got literally, in a weird way, I am so grateful that we got never listed on Coinbase or any of those exchanges, because that could have potentially backfired against us. The fact that we're getting, for HEX, for example, launch fully complete, fully decentralized. You interact with the contract. In other words, there is no investment contract, because it's just you and the contract. You're purely decentralized. We're not listed on any exchange. It is worldwide. The same way the judge said, well, using YouTube, which is global content, means that it doesn't mean that, oh, you're targeting American, even though it's an American company. It's global. The same thing when they were overreaching about, all the sacrifice lasted too long, all the way to April. Well, no, the word specifically said many, many times, sacrifice has ended on that date. So we're able to argue that they can't say that it continued all the way to April, because you're looking at some blockchain transaction. Our counsel was able to explain to the judge, because that's the part the judge didn't fully understand, is that we can say something has ended, but you can't stop people from sending money because it's blockchain. You can't stop that. But the relevance was what was, again, put on the website, clearly disclosed to see. Those are the dates. And when the dates were done, we clearly said sacrifice has ended. Because it has ended, it clearly stipulates, please do not send more money. So we can be able to use that clear disclosure language to say that this alleged, oh, it's continuing until April, it's basically false, because we clearly establish the timeline. And even if you were to look at it in terms of proportion of funds being sent, everybody knows that basically 99% of the funds were sent during the actual timeline. And then the people who didn't get the memo that sent money afterwards, that's a very, very small fraction. But then again, it's not here and there, because the two complaints are providing jurisdiction and providing that there is fraud. And clearly the timeline shows that you do not have a jurisdiction, because again, you failed to prove that, we're specifically targeting US investors. And that's really the key people need to understand. It's not whether or not accidentally, allegedly, some US investors got involved. It's about, are we specifically targeting US investors, which we are not, and they're failing to prove that. And those old cases were able to show that this is really the case. Same thing with the fraud, right? You can't prove a negative. It's like saying to somebody, well, I never send you money, And then you say, Kareem, prove to me that you never send me money, or I never send you money. It's just that simple. So when they were arguing that, oh, there is fraud because he used some language to kind of deceive investor, no, he clearly said it's a sacrifice. When you're sacrificing, the money is gone. Again, back to that double standard argument that I mentioned earlier. On one hand, you're saying we got to listen to every word that he says and take him accountable for that. And then on the other hand, you're saying, well, when he said this thing here that I don't like on the other shoe, you're saying, oh, he just said that tongue in cheek. You can't just basically interpreting and then making allegations as if they were facts. That's not how this works. So again, they were really able to block all those arguments. So that's why I think it's really, really good. And one more thing that I think is very important to mention that the judge pointed out, they were keep repeating, oh, he used some of the money to buy Rolexes and cars and da 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 da. And then the judge literally stopped him and be like, well, first of all, it's irrelevant what he does with the money. If it's his money, he do whatever he wants with it, basically. And I'm paraphrasing, because you're supposed to prove the complaint, which once again is there any fraud? Not whatever he did with the money. And it's lying. Exactly. But fraud is lying. So if there is no lie and there's clearly stipulation that clearly says you're sacrificing, the money is gone, it goes there, and he never said, quote unquote, the money will never be used for other things, you can then come back and say, well, it's fraud, he's lying. Again, back in, again, trying to prove a negative. So that's why that argument was able to be shut down once again. Whether the money is used for XYZ is irrelevant. There is no fraud. People were told you're sacrificing, the money is gone. There's no expectation of work of others. There is no expectation of you getting something from that money. That money is gone. Whatever happens to it, it's gone. It's like you went to a vacuum, imagine like a donation, it's gone. And the moment that happened, you no longer have ownership of that money. You no longer have expectation or control of that money. So whatever that money end up doing later on is irrelevant to, once again, the complaint. You're in court to prove things. And the two major complaints, once again, were the jurisdiction and the fraud, which they both failed to explain and prove. And like the counsel famously said, that was so cool. Yeah, he got a cool line. He says, Your Honor, there is literally no meat on the bone. I mean, I'm not even sure there is a bone. I mean, people almost wanted to laugh. That was so cool. It was trolling them live. That was so good.
The judge did ask, what's the purpose of sending money to the Sacrafice wallet? And the lawyer basically said that even though, there's no expectations in the process of sending money through the blockchain, you're making a statement.
Yep.
Just like when they burned books, just like any other situation, by sending this transaction, you're making a statement for freedom of speech and freedom of movement and stuff like that. So you're basically that, because the judge was really in favor actually of our case, but and she was really hammering down the SEC because they were jumbling around, not stuttering, but kind of like the whole time.
Making stuff up.
Yeah, but at one point she faces our lawyers and says, "Hey, what's the deal with sending all this money? I mean, isn't there some kind of expectations? What's the point? Why is everybody sending so much money?" Well, it's because we're making a statement. We don't have to, insinuate anything else from that point. So that was important. That was
very well said. And again, it is our legal right. It is our money. We chose to do whatever we want with our money. And that's really what this was basically all about. Not trying to say, oh, the money wasn't using for X, Y, and Z. It's just hitting it right from the get-go. You do not have jurisdiction and you cannot prove that there is fraud here. Everything else after that is irrelevant. It's like trying to talk about steps, hey, well, step A is like, well, you don't have a case. And this is the reason why we are at this stage about the motion of dismiss. And this is why they perfectly wasn't trying to justify too many reasons. Oh, why is the money going here and this, that, and chain analysis? Because we can also do that, because we can also prove that it's not because money is sent to an exchange, right? For example, I can have money, then send it to an exchange, and then I ended up buying something. You still can't prove that I used that money. I could have already money in my own account. I could have used that money. How do you know that the money that I used was the money from the blockchain? You still can't prove that. Well, we don't even need to go all the way there, because right from the get-go, once again, what are the complaints is you do not have jurisdiction, and you cannot prove that there is fraud here. And they were basically also showing that the SEC was literally making stuff up as they go, because the judge also said at some point, well, you're making this argument now, but it wasn't in your original complaint. And I was like, oh yeah, Your Honor, we just basically just thought about that right now. Like, that's crazy. Like, they were very unprepared. But I mean, it's not here or there, but they really hammered the key points, because again, that's what it is in court. Is if you complain about something, right? If you complain about A, you can't talk about B. Like, it don't make sense. You can't use argument for B to justify the complaint that is A.
Yeah, the rule is that if you're broadcasting globally, right? Even if some Americans receive the message, that's not illegal. You don't have to attempt to restrict all IP addresses in the American jurisdiction. By just broadcasting globally, it's okay. Now,
Freedom to
what they
write.
were trying to say, even in the case where you, with the written case, if you read through the allegations or the complaints, it actually says, well, YouTube is an American company, therefore, no. Go back. If it's globally, if you're targeting global investors and not specifically US, you're not going to conferences saying, hey guys, we need to raise money, right? Then again, it doesn't get into security. And
Yep.
again, it's contracts, SEC securities. If you got fundraisers going to basically collect money so that we can work for you and we'll start, creating buildings or building software, whatever it is, we're working for you to generate profit for you. That's our promise in hopes for a better future, more financial gains. Then you're getting into securities. And again, usually that has to do with the amount, right? If you do that in a small scale in your neighborhood, SEC is not going to come after you. But if you do this in billions of dollars, SEC will come after you if you break these laws. And it seems like Richard Hart, did his research and literally was dancing around all these case laws because the way it seems like in court, there's nothing that they can hammer him down with so far,
Yeah, and once again, the key part what John just said is that again, you are broadcasting. It is literally your right. It's freedom of speech, right? Blockchain is speech. So broadcasting is something that is legal that you can do. And another cool thing, once again, back to the jurisdiction, not only you have the freedom to broadcast, but you're not even broadcasting from the United States. That's another cool thing too. So they can't even use that. And it goes back to how, again, I'm so grateful that we were never listed on major exchanges in the US because that could have possibly be used against us, and we don't even have that. We literally has been pure DeFi from the jump, and that's why it's really good.
Now, potentially if Rich is not able to stream, right, does that stop the momentum of potential like price appreciation, content, etc.? Obviously, it's very, very important to have him back on, and I think a lot of us invested in him as a person, right? We watched the streams, we enjoyed what he was saying, and he's a very good mouthpiece, right? Like he's very good at speaking. He's a very logical, interesting individual. But the thing about the 140 different streamers and stuff like that, when we get positive news, when we get say dismissals, or when we get like things moving in the right direction, it only adds to the kind of snowball effect of a community that wants to stream, that wants to make content, that wants that to happen, because more people engage with it, more people feel positive about it. When things have gone bad or gone sour, right? You don't want to say something on a stream and then it starts to go the opposite direction, right? Like you don't want to push something, or I don't want to say promote, but you don't want to give your theory on something and then it goes the opposite way. And the motivation to stream, the motivation to put content out there is less and less and less. And I actually think, the more we get this kind of positive news, we don't necessarily need Richard to come back. It would help because he's, got the most clout. He can get on the biggest shows. He can reach larger audiences. But if we get positive news, if we get things in the right direction, there is going to be way more streamers that come in. Like back in 21, loads of people came in and started streaming because they start talking about this product or talking about this crypto. I'm using the wrong terminology there. Talking about this crypto, and it was going up, and things were positive. So the motivation there for people to then go and talk about it and not feel nervous to talk about it starts to go up, and I think that will all amplify. Obviously, green candles brings that, and those candles come from investor confidence, and so this has been positive for the HEX Pulsechain ecosystem in general.
Argue that to some degree because I watch a lot of people, grow. People that if it wasn't for Richard, good or bad, not streaming, I know some streamer who have told me they probably wouldn't even have started to stream. So it's almost like in indirectly in disguise, it turned into be a blessings because if people feel well, Rich is streaming, everybody's gonna watch Rich, then quote unquote, my voice don't matter, which is a fallacy because everybody's voice matters. So the fact that he wasn't able to stream, for obvious reason that we all know, he created that vacuum that other people were able to come in and fill. People that thought that wow, streaming is hard, and then it's like, bro, just turn on the microphone and just speak. Trying to tell the truth, do your best, do your research, and then just do the best you can. Spread the love, talk about the thing that you love. And a lot of people were able to step up and then catch a few views. You know what I mean? Like everybody remember their first couple views, right? Oh wow, people actually care about what I have to say. Boom. And then you build your confidence from there. Next thing you know, you got 20, 30 people that come and listen to you. And then now you start a farm. Then it grows to 100. Then it goes to 1,000. So it's like in disguise. And I heard somebody earlier made the kind of Satoshi analogy, which was kind of pretty good. So, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, it's good to know that he's still around, but I don't think that whether he streams or not, because we've been to that double bear market and we understand and we're literally battle tested. That's why I've never been more bullish, because I'm like, bro, we've seen it all. Like, throw it at us, we got it. Like, we're literally like a lethal weapon, like Team Sim 6. Like, we know what to do. Like, the general can send a mission and then we just go execute. It's just like, we're good to go. So on that end, trust me when I say this, we are good to go. So whether Rich comes back now, later, obviously depending on the case, obviously it'll be good to have him simply for the simple fact that I want him to be able to express his freedom and be able to come and talk. Because anybody that really knows Richard knows that he loves to hang out with the community. He loves to go live. Like, he was the one inspiring us to do freaking 6-hour streams. Why did we do that? Why did I do that with Maddie and Wells and stuff? Because we saw Richard do it. Why did Hexology went on 24-hour live stream with the community and we're just out here? We're breaking the internet. Nobody do what we do because Richard led the way. He didn't quit. He's sitting there, hanging out, and it's not like he's going to press play and be like, oh, I'm going to be here for 6 hours. No, it started, we're like, oh, maybe it's going to be like an hour or two. And then he's just a great conversationalist. Great conversation, answering questions, sometimes just staying literally until he answers everybody's questions. And when there's literally no more questions, we start talking about life, other things, a little bit of sci-fi, and the next thing you know, good night, guys. So in other words, it's like, it just turns out to be 6 hours because we're just hanging out and having fun. Like, people will come in, get their drinks, be in their kitchen, cooking, just like literally you're just hanging out with the community. That's what makes it so powerful. That's why today I got people that I call brothers and sisters, people that I haven't even talked to directly face to face for years. And then literally I see them, it's like, boom, it's like I saw you last week. We just start where we left off because we're connected. And that's the power of streams, community. We're not physically next to each other, but we're there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't feel me physically, but you feel me. Like I'm saying. And that's really what's the key. So I will encourage every streamer, every new streamers, like, it's good not to just wait and rely on Richard. Just be out there. He will come when the time is right. You know what I mean? We'll live it to, you know, the world is going to come into place in the right place. And especially after this election, and if everything goes well, obviously, you know, now we got to wait for the judge to come up with the writing. It might be, you know, weeks, who knows, months, but it's looking good. We're just going to leave it at that. We don't want to over speculate. But again, keep spreading the word. There's going to be a transcript that's going to come out. You know what I mean? We have all the details. We were here. So it's like, we're looking good. Now we just got to continue to do the work that we have already started to do. Bull market or not, real Hexagon knows it's not about timing the market. Let me remind you, right? Everybody know the favorite quote. It's not about timing the market. It's time in the market. We didn't just started all this because we're just going to be here for 1 or 2 cycles. No. Those of us who did cuatro cincos, we know we here 15 years. What does that mean? If you do the math, that's what? That's minimum 4 halvings almost. So it's like, okay, cool, halving, next bull market. And I heard somebody say, oh, we're worried about the bull market. No, we're not worried about that. Real Hexagons don't worry about the bull market because we know we're going to see more bull markets. We're going to see times where we know Hex going to be dollar plus because we understand that we're playing the long-term game. And every day we go stronger. Every day. It's like we got antidotes. Imagine having all the vaccine shots and then literally whatever comes at you, it's like your immune system is ready. And that's who we are. Now we just need to stay ready, double down, don't take anything for granted, right? And then keep pushing the good word. That's it. Spreading the truth, spreading the good word, education, and ask questions if you don't know something, and then just do what you do best. And this is the one thing that we're so good at that cannot be duplicated. Everybody knows. That's really the key. This is why you can fork a coin, but you can't fork a community. Those are not just tongue-in-cheek statements. Those are real, especially with Hexagon.
And speaking of the community, there was one funny scenario. I don't know if anybody told it yet, but the SEC lawyer was basically talking about the Americans who sent money. The judge asked, "Who do you have proof of a specific person or people that has sent money from the U.S. to this, exchange, whatever you want to call it, address?" And basically, he did not have any proof.
Yep.
In fact, the only thing he did was he asked the judge, excuse me, can I turn around and show these, show of hands in the audience? And the judge basically said, no, absolutely not. You're not allowed to ask the audience to raise their hand to say who sent money to the address. So again, the judge was being extremely fair and, really just pointing out that the SEC was just fumbling the ball the whole time with not real, just changing, the goalpost or trying to use fraud in SEC scenarios or SEC and fraud scenarios. I mean, it's just
they were literally freeballing. I mean, again, I've been in sales for so many years. I can tell when somebody's just freestyling. They were literally, and the reason why she also say no is because it was like absolutely no. You need to respect the court. I mean, this is crazy. You're just gonna show of hands. Like it's like telling people, hey, come here, and then come and vote, and then don't have an ID. Like what? Like people can easily lie. It's like, okay, what if I am or not? And I go, okay, let me just raise my hands or not raise my hands. Like, what if I have people in the audience that are planted there?
It's your
just
job.
To come in. Like, it's crazy.
It's your job as a lawyer in front of the judge, a federal judge. You have to bring proof. You got to bring proof to your complaints.
Show of hands, no
if
proof.
not, then just get the complaint out the window and stop bothering us. That's the whole thing. So don't do that.
I have a quick question, if I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this brings up an interesting point. Was there any sense, and I know I'm asking you guys to do a little maybe mind reading here, that the audience was pro the community and not victims? And was there any sense of there's 44,500 plus signatures waiting on the Pulse petition? Did you guys have that feeling or no?
Well, yeah, I mean, because first of all, we oversaturated that place. That was crazy. I mean, literally, there was like 75 plus of us, and some of us was in a separate room because where we were standing at was already crowded, 60, and everybody was obviously very, very respectful and everything. But like the sentiment and the judge could see and feel it, and that's why she was so fair because like those guys are serious. They came all the way here from all across the world, right, to defend this. We're not victims. We know what we're doing. We know what we sacrificed for. Nobody was saying like, "Oh my God, we're some victim. Please help us." Like none. Like
Yeah,
trust me, if that was the case, the SEC would have brought those people and stopped being, "Oh,
Well,
there's victims in the audience."
if I
Yep.
yeah, I would say if I had to speculate as to why the lawyers asked the community to show up, might have been more related to like seeing if the judge could give us a timely answer versus like the case of jurisdiction wasn't decided by whether people were going to show up there or not. And Nuclear Herbs said earlier on this space, which people will be able to go back and listen to, that just because you have people in America that live in America that are coming to the court, that doesn't prove anything, especially proving anything that's being considered right now in the jurisdiction phase. And so maybe if any of these pieces of HEX or Pulse and Pulsex, like if any of those move on to the next phase of court, then it might be more relevant, some other things. And it was interesting because I was talking to one of Richard's lawyers after the after the case was over. They were hanging around talking to a lot of us, and I asked them like, "Hey, why is it that the SEC kept saying and the judge was almost saying like that it was Richard's HEX conference? It was my HEX conference, and doesn't that give HEX a better case if all of this evidence because Kareem and anybody else Yoon who were there, how many times did they bring up the HEX conference?
So many times.
It was so hilarious because it's like they keep bringing it up. Like literally, you can sense it. It was palpable that that was their only little threat that they were trying to use to try to create, some level of jurisdiction. But it's like, first of all, they kill it with one shot by saying, well, first of all, the adapter amplifier ended, for HEX, and then the conference is literally 11 freaking months later after the end of it. So just that alone was like, wait, what is Richard Nostradamus? Like he would knew and he will project 11 months in the future? No. And the counsel perfectly said, I love the word that he used. Like he understood that it wasn't done via Richard. It's just something that the community came across and did it themselves. And the community, I quote his word, just invited Richard to come and get a lifetime achievement award, which is true, to come to be celebrated for what he has created. In other words, we did it and we invited him to come to our event that we put together as a community. And that really was the key. So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch. first shot right away with the timeline, and then just by explaining, well, the reason why he was invited there was just so he can get that award for what he has created, not to come and promote. And they also said, which is important to point to the judge, not because I said something is cool that it means that I'm actively making updates for the thing. And that's very, very important, especially that in the case of Hex, launch, finish, and complete, right? You interact with a contract or not, it's up to you. But if I say something is cool, that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
I'm creating some expectational work of others. I'm going to create another cool things and then add this on top. No, it's finished. It's done. There's no upgrade. There's nothing else to be done. So that was really,
and
really
and
important.
and to make it like a little bit more clear for people that weren't there or even people who were there, the only Hex conference we've had, at least four of these, if you don't even count the 24-hour streams and stuff like that. But the only Hex conference that they were referencing now was the one that I put on in Las Vegas, right? Because Las Vegas is in the United States. And I noticed that they did not bring up even any of the statements that they had done in the original write up the SEC had done, the complaint against Hex and Richard originally, where they had mentioned at that point, the most recent Hex conference that was only online,
Yep.
and that was the last time that Richard had still is the last time he spoke publicly on YouTube. And they didn't mention that at all.
Yep.
And it's because in this stage of the court case, not everything gets addressed. It's only things that can relate back to jurisdiction to see if
Exactly.
it needs to get thrown out. And so I told Richard's lawyers afterwards, like, hey, isn't it true that you could have made even a stronger argument if you had said that it wasn't Richard's conference in the first place? And to some extent that they had argued that, but then the SEC just kept bringing it up, because this all goes back to the timeline of whether the statements that they cherry picked against Richard and against Hex even fit into a timeline that makes any sense. Otherwise, it's going to be the timeline not making sense that is part of what gets this case dismissed, at least against Hex. And to summarize for people who haven't been in here earlier, probably the biggest takeaway from this, one of the biggest surprises I had was, it's theoretically possible now for the judge to dismiss Hex and continue with Pulse and Pulsex, or
Yep.
dismiss all three, or not dismiss any of
What
them.
about
But I
what?
hadn't
What
realized
about
that.
that argument that software, a piece of software that's immutable, cannot be a person that
They
can be
made
sued?
that, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so there were all these different angles that the SEC was trying, and they were going through like all this case law back and forth,
How
the
about the
oral
time
arguments,
machine
and
argument that the point in time when he bought the diamonds and all that was 6 months or so before he ever did the sacrifice? Did that get mentioned or?
they were questioning it just under this uniform concept. So they didn't mention time machine, but they were attacking the timeline at every turn because the timeline is so weak. And so that's what we have posted in the nest here is the actual chart that Richard's team gave to the judge.
Did the
And
SEC have any effective defense, or what would you say was their biggest defense that was even reasonable?
Well, literally, if you, I'm trying my best to be as objective as possible. Literally, that's what the comment was that went viral. Was, I mean, literally, he says, "Your Honor, there's no meat on the bone." I'm not even sure if there is a bone, because one of the biggest stretch that they were trying to use by saying, "Oh, sacrifice phase ended here," but then people keep donating or depositing money until April, basically like months later, even though clearly on the website it says it has ended. But let's just pretend, and then that's what the council used. Let's even pretend for 2 seconds, allegedly, that we use the new timeline that the SEC is trying to use. Well, clearly, the event that it's talking about, like, oh, buying this and Rolex and blah, 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 and diamonds, it's like, well, it still happened literally 6 months after. And once again, we're going back to what is the actual complaint. This is where the SEC was trying to freeball to appeal, kind of like a little bit of socialism, but the judge just shut that down real quick. It's like, wait a minute. If the guy clearly disclosed and tells you this is a sacrifice and there is no fraud, because that's what you're arguing, well, that's it. I don't need to hear anything else. I don't need to hear about what the money is being used for and this and that, trying to appeal to be like, because they would literally they made a comment about saying they compare it to like Jean Valjean, for those who know, and like, oh, Your Honor, it's not like we're taking breads here. Like it's a lot of money, and it's like, whoa, where are you going with this? Because at the end of the day, you came here arguing for fraud. If there is no fraud and people are sacrificing, doesn't matter how much it is, he do whatever he wants with the money. So if 6 months later, right, after people already sacrificed with no expectation of work of others, whatever that money end up doing 6 months later had nothing to do with nobody's business.
Oh my God,
And the
guys.
judge, that was crazy. And the judge even said at the end, kind of tongue in cheek laughing, but like ultimately, right, the product got delivered, right? And it's working, right? I said, yeah, Your Honor, you're absolutely right. The counsel was just like, yeah. So even in the most extreme of the cases, it's like literally, what are we arguing about? Like nobody got defrauded.
See,
Yeah.
this is
Like,
what
Let
I
me
was
let
worried
me
yeah, go ahead,
about
Mike.
when I.
let me
Uh,
answer before we move on. Let me
Yeah,
answer what I think the SEC's best case was, or the kind of the weakest part of Richard's team. Having a clear motion to dismiss that the judge is going to pick up on, and yeah. But before I give that, I'm just going to say there was a moment where the judge was questioning the SEC's arguments, and she was saying, well, this could be game over for your case. If I think that's when she was talking about where does the blockchain live, and how trying to connect the
exactly.
dots again
Yep,
for jurisdiction. But I would say that the one thing that the judge was asking that maybe she kept coming back to, because she still was waiting to see if there were any good arguments, is why would people sacrifice if they weren't expecting anything, basically, was one. And the second is was just kind of at the end, there was this discussion about whether you even are allowed to ask about the four legs of Howie, because, and Richard's team was arguing, maybe you can't even start asking the four legs of Howie because there's no contract. And I
exactly.
thought that
No
this was
investment
really
contract.
interesting because the judge was picking up that, like, all of the other cases in crypto that are supposed to set a precedent, and that set a precedent in the SEC's favor, were not finished products when they launched. Did not have a
Exactly.
founder that was doing things like Richard did, and so. But I think the judge and the SEC and Richard's team, they were all struggling with this gap in the past cases, because there were cases that were decided that were being leaned on by the SEC, that, yeah, this is a security, and they're not deciding that yet, but that's relevant in disqualifying the case from going forward based on jurisdiction. It's like they had to draw a line back to jurisdiction for everything. They weren't saying, basically, like, other elements of the case that'll be decided in if it goes forward, because everything had to draw back to jurisdiction
Well,
in this
I'm
case. And so,
curious if this point was made at all, which was that two things can be true at the same time, and you could have hoped for a good outcome, but without expectations, and at the same time been damned certain of your support for the first and second, the freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, and that was immutably carved into nodes all over the damn world, almost exporting our First Amendment to other countries because we're there forever. And if you ever look at the Ether scan, it even says, sacrifice, and those nodes will keep that forever on both chains, actually, even on the Pulse chain. So I could actually want that. And
Exactly.
as a matter of fact, if you had said to me as a sacrificer, hey, put your money in, and there's a good chance you'll win in this blockchain, but also you're supporting Adolf Hitler, I would have said no. And so would have most people. So I think two things can be true at the same time. And I hope that gets made clear, because that was the main point of the petition. When I was working on that thing, it took me almost a month to get everything lined up. But that was what one of the main things that 44,500 plus people said. So I hope that.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. I want to point out that Danny is the one who wrote the Pulse
Well, I'm not looking
petition
for anything
that
from that.
was.
I'm not trying to raise my hand and say it was me, but yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah, exactly.
recognizing that you were very helpful and all that, and so I want to thank you as somebody in the community who really appreciates when
Nice.
people
Good
are.
stuff. Again, it goes back to the genius of Richard Hart to make sure there is no ambiguity, the clear language. I remember back in the day, people complain about, oh my God, there's so much disclosure that's going to scare people, da da da, and people are not going to want to invest or whatever, whatever, which is like, no, it's there for a reason. So that way, SEC can't try to play those games, because that's what, sometimes lawyers trying to do. They trying to take what you said and trying to flip it and then trying to create an other interpretation. Oh, well, he said this, but that's not what he meant. Like I was saying earlier with the double standard, where it's like, on one hand, they want to use Richard's word for word. And on the other hand, they'll be like, well, he said this, yes, but that's not what he meant. Like, how do you know what he meant? He clearly, so the strong language, the strong disclosure literally is what ended up, quote unquote, saving us as a whole. So I really want to point that out. So that was a genius move that he did, to be very, very crystal clear, so that his words cannot be misconstrued or manipulated and all this other stuff. So that's why it's really,
You
really
know about that point too, that's super important, which is this: what the SEC in their original complaint actually edited Richard's words, so it became like one of those things where, you know how famously they always have Trump saying there's good people on both sides, and then they edit out the next sentence, which is, I'm not talking about the white supremacists. They did that to Richard, and what part of the footnotes were on the I'll quit talking about the petition, but one of them was to put the rest of the statement back in, and it was one of the most severe disclosures you could have gotten. I think it had to do with
that
whether or not he was going to be working for you, and he was like, no, blah, 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 blah. And the SEC just edited that part out, so it looked like Richard was saying something he wasn't in the original complaint.
very well said. So again, that's wisdom on his part. Again, be able to see this far fetched or well ahead. It goes back to, again, what I always loved about Hex from the get-go, when I was telling people, guys, the fact that this thing launched complete, you have no idea. This is what it was running circle on the head of the SEC. And I think the judge, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here in a way, but I can sense that the judge was impressed, because they came up with all those precedent case, trying to be like, oh, it's going to be a walk in the park because we're going to be able to use that. And then the thing ended up backfiring on them, because, again, our counsel, genius as they are, they didn't waste their time trying to argue Howie and this, that, because, right, there's Howie language, so to speak. You can't deny that. And it's good that they never lied. They never trying to like create stuff like the SEC lawyers were doing. They basically say, whoa, 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 before we even get there, we don't even have an investment contract. Again, which goes back to the whole case while we're doing a motion to dismiss, because we have so much more ammo we can use, but we don't even need to waste our breath, because, again, you do not have jurisdiction. And then there is no fraud here, because those are the complaint, right? We came here based on the complaint, so we don't even need to waste our breath on other things. The same way where the SEC try to be slick, where you come up with those two complaints with the sloppy work, but then you want to argue about something else to trying to get some type of, like, populism going on. But yeah, use the money to buy this and buy that. Whoa, whoa, that's not
Well,
what we
then
hear
you know
about.
what,
We
Purp?
hear
You
about
and Maddie
fraud,
made my
and we
night.
hear
You
about.
made my night, and here's why. I was worried
Oh,
about
thank you.
Carol Amon Bagley, because she's well into her 70s. And I thought, oh my God. And she
Okay.
had ruled severely against one crypto case, but I think it was a total scam and whatever she did. But I
Mm-hmm.
thought, based on her career as a government prosecutor, that I mean, if you look at her record, she's ruled against a lot more than she's ruled for defendants, and usually always in favor of
Mm-hmm.
government three-letter agencies. So I'm just glad as hell that she has the capacity to see through this. That's wonderful. And she is a Republican, but that doesn't matter. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed about the judge, period. Very knowledgeable, very sharp, because people say, oh, it's the old judge, this and that. What if, crypto, new people, because people can have those easy bias thinking like, oh, wow, what does she know about crypto? But she was on point. Seems like she did her research. I like to believe, that's my speculation. I like to believe that the fact that we were there
Oh,
also
yes.
helped to make sure, like, oh, all those people are here. I'm going to do my job. I'm gonna make sure I hear everything out because again, it's affecting people's lives. It's no longer the joke about, oh, look at all these bots or Richard control everything. No, real people showed up
So somehow
from
it was
all
clear
around
that
the world.
those real people were against the SEC, even though they weren't shouting
You
and
know
they
what
were
I'm
well
saying?
behaved.
Exactly. And that's another thing too that show respect, right? People came, polished, nice, took off their hat, really cool, all rise, all that stuff. Like good etiquette. Like we represented the community very well. I was very pleased, very impressed, good attitude all
I
around,
wonder. I wonder what
respectful.
would have happened if the judge had let one of you guys speak.
Yeah, and you can tell that our council, the seven, they were very relaxed, very prepared, and they love the fact that we were there. It's kind of like imagine if you play like a sports, right? And then you play in front of your home team, and we're here supporting you. So it's like they were really just in the groove. And I can say one thing too that was really cool. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like some of them, it's so cool. They were like, "Oh, Kareem, I'm glad you're out." I was like, "Wow!" Some of them even knew about like us. Like it's just like it's really it's not just because you think lawyer they just get paid, right? But it was cool to see like people were like genuinely like, well, they knew what it was. Like, oh, I'm glad you're out. I'm glad you're okay. Like it felt good. It's like, wow, they actually care. You know what I mean?
Well, Kareem, you
So
had a
that's
lot of
another
support
thing
among the
that's like
community too. I'll tell
when
you
you
that.
see that,
Yeah.
it's powerful. It tells you that they're gonna put their best foot forward. They're not gonna do slappy work, collect a check and bounce, right? They're making sure. Oh, it was cool. They had illustration. They can prepare. Like it was like a team. Like only two people were talking, but everybody else was like moving, writing things down, passing it around, using for illustration, helping the judge. It was just, dude, gangster. It was so good. And then like, and the SEC felt like there was just like three of them, and at some point there was a fourth guy that came in. But it's like we are like 8 lawyers, and they are like 4, and then we are like 60 some people literally in attendance. It's like
Right.